The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 16. Londinium. It took me a moment to realize that I had left the mists and entered Londinium. The streets were so choked with fog that I could scarcely see more than an arm's length before my face, and I thought at first that the blurred outlines of buildings around me were the sorts of vague images that one's mind conjures to break the monotony of the mists. Not until I heard a child crying for help did I know that I had arrived. I am certain that my patron will mock my powers of perception here. Doubtless his eyes would have pierced the fog and seen the truth of his surroundings the very moment he set foot in Londinium. Alas, he is forced to rely upon my meager talents as I struggle in vain to think and formulate solutions to everyday problems. I had intended to spare my patron an exhaustive report detailing every strategy that I employed in Santa Cecilia, summarizing only my magical efforts to show him that his gifts were being well used. Otherwise, he might accuse me of neglecting to use them, as he did in Flint's Archipelago. It seems that my patron desires a more thorough accounting of my actions. You will find a more detailed report attached to this one, Yensid, and I do hope that you find it enlightening. I ran toward the child's voice. Every turn I took on the streets is detailed in the attached notes. But when I arrived, she was gone. All that remained were the prints of a man with a peg leg. A man I would soon learn was a lieutenant of the dreaded Lord of Londinium's underworld. While a queen ostensibly rules Londinium, its true ruler is one who styles himself as the world's greatest criminal mind, Professor Ratigan.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft Domains of Dread because of the Venn diagram overlap of Vincent Price.
Along the way, we'll look at the Darklord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate this setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, The Great Mouse Detective.
I believe you mean Basil of Baker Street.
Yes, Basil of Baker Street.
The animation department is going to throw a giant hissy fit.
There was a whole thing about it, yeah.
Yes. If you haven't heard about the behind the scenes, the books were called the Basil of Baker Street books. And the animation department wanted to call them that, and marketing was like, no, Great Mouse Detective is more marketable. And it was a whole thing.
Yeah, it was a whole thing.
Anyway.
So, as mentioned, here we have the glorious golden mellifluous pipes of Vincent Price, playing our villain of this movie, Professor Ratigan, who is this book series and movies version of Professor Moriarty. And if we can get Vincent Price in an episode, if we can have our podcast feature Vincent Price, gosh dang it, we have to. He is not directly a source of Ravenloft, but sometime I'll give you my theory about the Roger Corman Poe movies' influence on Borka.
I love when you whisper sweet nothings to me.
Quick note before we dive into our specifics. Great Mouse Detective and Basil of Baker Street, as the book series and Hearts of Animators called this movie, is a sort of secret world of animals series. If you remember, if you've seen Great Mouse Detective, the idea is there is this human world, and then the mice have their own little version of that world, like underneath. So yeah, there are humans, but mice also wear clothes and solve murder mysteries and have a royal family, and that's where most of our action is.
Like, Basil lives in Sherlock Holmes's basement, and Queen Mousetoria lives in
Buckingham Palace's
basement.
Yeah, we're not doing that. That's just kind of a conceptual nightmare for the idea of a D&D setting for your players to go into. So we are not doing mice in a human world. We are not having our version of Basil of Baker Street be a mouse. We are just doing a human world. A human world inspired by the Basil of Baker Street books by the Great Mouse Detective, with one significant exception. And that exception is the person we're going to begin our discussion of the podcast with, our Darklord of this setting, Professor Ratigan, Professor Paydrag Ratigan, if you want to bring some of the book stuff in, give him a first name.
He's Irish?
Yes, yeah. In a section that we like to call
The Lord. The Lord. Ratigan's precise origins are a mystery. I was unable to determine whether professor signifies an actual history in academia, or simply an affectation he has taken on to proclaim his intelligence. I have attached all of my research from Londinium's Public Record Office, lest my patron accuse me of overlooking something. What is known is that Professor Padraig Ratigan has his fingers in virtually all criminal activity in Londinium, and there is much activity for him to oversee. From gangs of thugs who murder and rob for him, to corrupt officials who abet his smuggling and embezzling operations, Ratigan's empire cuts across all social strata. Matters have only grown worse since the death of Ratigan's greatest rival, a detective known as Basil of Baker Street. Basil was always able to foil Ratigan's plans before they came to fruition. With him gone, there was no check on the criminal underworld save a hapless and overwhelmed police force, many of whom were on the professor's payroll. An emboldened Ratigan has proceeded to concoct ever more elaborate and far-reaching schemes, as if mocking the police for their inability to stop him. Rumors persist that many of Ratigan's enforcers are monstrous in some way. Lycanthropes and undead are said to serve in his ranks, and he supposedly has a trained wyvern who devours incompetent minions. Apparently, the quickest way to draw Ratigan's ire is to assert that he himself is a lycanthrope, specifically a were-rat. After Basil foiled his attempts to kidnap the queen and claim the crown for himself some years ago, multiple eyewitnesses saw him transform into a massive, slavering sewer rat. Even though his monstrous nature is now a matter of common knowledge, Ratigan sees to it that anyone who publicly remarks on it is silenced. Multiple journalists in Londinium have been blackmailed, beaten, or found dead in the sewers, as if to make a point as to who the true sewer rat is.
So, if you're listening to this, you presumably know what a Ratigan is, and if not, you definitely have to know what a Vincent Price is. But
And you certainly know what a Moriarty is.
Yes, right. That's try finding someone that doesn't. But you might not know what a darklord is if you're just one of those adult Disney nerds. It's like, oh, great Master Detective, I love it. I'm going to click on this. I don't care what it is. Welcome. Yes.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy our series. I promise you'll like the rest of it. Listen to the other episodes. But for those people, Rachel, what is a darklord?
Well, a darklord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that makes the dark powers say, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pick them up and they put them in a domain that is a special hell created just for them. There are good darklords, and there is a second edition ICAF. So I'm shaking it up.
Yeah, right.
Xian Chang was incomprehensible in second edition.
You were all ready for the Earth von Karkov thing. And I give the guy a break.
Yeah, I rag on him enough.
Mm-hmm.
So we've decided on 4 factors that kind of separate the 5th edition Xianshangs from the 2nd edition Xianshangs. And we're going to go through these 4 qualities and how they apply to the Darklord, who has always been fantastic, Strahd von Zarovich.
The mold from which all other Darklords are cast.
And then we're going to discuss how these 4 qualities apply to Professor Ratigan. So the first quality is that act of ultimate darkness. Strahd killed his brother because he wanted to get with his brother's fiancée. The second quality is what they call in 5th edition the Torment, what we call, because we're a Disney podcast, they got what they wanted, they lost what they had.
Adult Disney nerds, you clicked on the link, listen to our Princess and the Frog episode.
And in Strahd's case, it was that, you know, he has power, he has eternal youth, because he thought Tatiana wasn't into him because he was old. His brother is out of the way. Oh, yeah, so is Tatiana. But she's going to be coming back constantly just to make him crazy. The third element is an element of tragedy or relatability. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something in them that makes us cringe in recognition. And in Strahd's case, it's that unrequited love is really awful. And then the fourth element is that the domain reflects the Darklord and their curse in some way. Strahd is not the Darklord of Icaf, or Ecaf, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, apologies. He is the Darklord of Barovia, so it's all gothic, and vampires, and wolves, and mist, and all the fun vampire things. And it's also a lonely, boring mud slump, because it's kind of reflecting that curse of loneliness of not being with Tatiana.
So, for Professor Ratigan, there are a couple of these that fit very well, and that sort of inspire us to make him a Darklord and want to do this. This is another one of those movies where we pretty much wanted to do Great Master Detective from the beginning, for a bunch of reasons that we're going to get into. But part of it is there are a number of these that connect with Professor Ratigan. And the first of our criteria that we're going to talk about Professor Ratigan with is that act of ultimate darkness. This we don't really have a good one for.
Yeah.
There is not a specific thing, origin story we get in the movie or in any of the books, and I read them all. They were short, it was fast. But honestly, at this point, it's irrelevant. Speaking of Erich von Karkov, we talked about how he kind of became a Darklord for being bad. Just sort of nondescript. I guess he did some bad stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is one where, that's not a cop-out. It's
he's Moriarty.
He's Moriarty. He's done so much bad stuff. You have your choices. If you wanted to connect it with the movie, it actually could be his whole plan in the movie to replace the Queen with a robot, or more specifically, morally interestingly, almost killing Olivia Flaversham a couple of times to thwart Basil. That could be the act of ultimate darkness. The one we're going with in the write-up of the infinite constellations of possible evil actions is in the world's greatest criminal mind, glorious villain song,
Ratigan. I hope that was the free space on the bingo card.
Yes. There was a line about the Tower Bridge job that made Londoners sob. And then there's also the line, worse than the widows and orphans you drowned. And apparently there was a deleted line where it was going to be building on that, saying basically that they, shoved a bunch of people into the river from London Bridge and then would shoot them if they surfaced. Whoa, holy God, yeah, and then just the higher-ups are absolutely not.
What are you thinking?
No. You're lucky we're letting you get away with this worse than the widows and orphans you drowned line. So that is our specific, just because for our purposes, for doing this as a write-up on DM's Guild of the domain, it has to include a specific act of ultimate darkness. That's what we're doing, but
because that's even
pretty
worse than trying to
bad.
replace Queen Moustoria with a robot.
I would say, yes. And then we have the Torment, and this is where we're getting into a little bit more interesting specifics to Ratigan, and also where we're getting into some of our, story, what we're doing with this domain. So you have that really interesting thing, like in the song World's Greatest Criminal Mind, where if anyone he's obviously a rat, right? He's obviously a rat. Mm-hmm. He has all the characteristics. He has the different number of fingers. He's got the tail. He's huge. He's obviously a rat, but he insists that he's a mouse. And he feeds the poor drunk henchman who calls him a rat to Felicia. And just gets really upset, really clearly gets under his skin when anyone calls him a rat. And we mentioned we're mostly imagining humans, or just other random, D&D equivalent of humans. But we have a great analogy of that, which is having him be a were-rat. Mm-hmm. So in our version, he is a were-rat. And it's just kind of known he's a were-rat, and he really hates that that's known. It pretends it's not true, and if you mention it, he will feed you to his pet dragon or whatever.
We have stuff.
Yeah, we'll get to Felicia. He feeds you to Felicia, and so that right there, that kind of ongoing itch in his brain, that impossible desire to sort of pretend he's not the thing he is, that's a good in for a torment. And then building on that, we even have this scene at the end, really, really good scene at the end, where, Basil's completely foiled his plan, and Basil's getting away, and he just, hulks out. He just rips off his, fancy clothes. His, claws seem to come out of his hands, and he just is this monstrous rat chasing Basil.
And you get the whole, when he rats out, the thing that he really values about himself is that he's the greatest criminal mind. He's the superior mind, and this and that. And when he rats out, his higher reason is gone.
Yeah, he's just feral.
Just all that stuff he values about himself, he loses. So there's a really cool torment there.
So the torment all comes from that sense of that lack of self-control and that lack of that higher reason. And that kind of takes two forms. And it all comes down to that quote that you're going to hear a whole bunch this episode, the superior mind. When he thinks he's won, he's got Basil in a death trap.
I have a prediction for what our ideal is going to be.
And the glorious Vincent Price delivery of I've won! The superior mind has triumphed! And he is obsessed with proving he's the superior mind. So the general torment is the lack of respectability. That, he wants to be respected. He wants to be acknowledged as the superior mind.
Oh, and then I just thought of it with this thing. The whole, if he's the superior mind, then clearly he's a person.
Right, yeah, you could tie that in, yeah. If he's the superior mind. And that'll never happen because his rat nature will always mean, like, when he gets angry, when he gets upset, he'll turn into this hulking feral monster. So he cannot ever sort of win, I'm air quoting, in society. He can never win as the superior mind because he's a were-rat. That changes when he gets angry. And in a more specific torment to that, this is kind of the really specific, you'll never get to be with Tajana style torment, is he'll never beat Basil. That Basil always will beat him. That's his fondest, dearest dream in life, is to beat Basil, because that's his worthy opponent. That's in his mind, the second greatest mind in Mousedom. And that if he can definitively and absolutely beat Basil, then he can sort of like, see, the superior mind has triumphed. I am the superior mind. And I can just sort of rest easy in that. I don't have that gnawing anxiety anymore, or as we like to call it, torment.
But honey, if his specific torment is that he'll never beat Basil, and Basil is his main rival, who's like the greatest detective in all of Mousedom, what are the PCs going to do? Because Basil is clearly the PC.
That sounds like a discussion we had to have in planning this episode.
Very lengthy discussion we had.
Long back and forth.
This was a similar problem to what we had with Robin Hood.
Yes.
That Robin Hood is such a PC, and he's so proactive, and not only that, but his rivalry with Prince John is such a huge part of Prince John's torment. That, we had this with Belle. We mentioned we had to kill Belle in Beauty and the Beast because she's a PC. But, all that matters is that she's the best. It didn't have to be Belle specifically. She doesn't have to be part of Gaston's torment. Robin Hood and Basil both have to be part of their respective Dark Lord torments.
The takeaway is, don't be a PC in a Disney movie if the Kohlers get their hands on you. Because, like Belle, like Robin Hood, we've killed off Basil. Or have we? So, our backstory. Basil's his great rival. Basil's his counterpart. Basil's his worthy opponent. They have framed pictures of each other on each other's walls. It's very intense.
Who was it who described him as the most
I think Lindsay Ellis, the world's most extra ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
But they made their breakup everyone's problem. And we're doing a version, since the wonderful thing about this is we have not only Great Mouse Detective, not only the books, but the whole corpus of Holmesania. We have the whole canon of Sherlock Holmes to draw from, and all of the various iterations, and this is one of the archetypes of like our cultural entertainment. Is Sherlock Holmes. Just endlessly iterated character, concept, dilemma, and that usually includes Professor Moriarty. So you might be familiar with, even if it's just from the Benedict Cumberbatch series, there's this death of Holmes at Reichenbach Falls. That's Moriarty clashes with Holmes, and Holmes seems to die. And that's kind of where we're coming in. We're coming in between seasons 2 and 3 of Sherlock. Like, that Moriarty is after Basil. He tracks him to Reichenbach Falls. He has this trap planned. He's up there waiting for them. He knows they're planning the visit. This is all from the story, the book, and the Holmes book, not the Eve, what's-her-face book. Eve Titus book. That would be a bit grim.
Yeah.
But...
Jeez.
So...
Basil of Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah. So he's waiting there, and he's got this person planning to go and get Watson, which in our case is Dawson, to distract him, to take him back to the hotel so he can confront Holmes one-on-one, and they can have their, epic final battle, ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and hours went by, and nothing. So finally he's like, what the heck, Basil? I was annoyed when you were 15 minutes late. It's been 6 hours.
Were my clues too subtle?
Yeah.
I was not trying to be subtle.
With a legitimate, air of confusion, comes down the mountain, goes back to, the village, and discovers that when Basil and Dawson were traveling up the path, Basil stopped to look at something, tripped, fell over the mountain, and died.
Or, had an aneurysm.
Yeah, just, grabbed his heart. Slipped and tumbled over the mountain.
Just Basil had some completely anticlimactic death.
Just the stupidest.
Stupid.
Beyond George R. Martin random, getting a paper cut and dying of sepsis. No, this was just the most embarrassing death possible. Yeah. No, so this is it. This is the heart of the torment of where we're coming into the story right now. Basil is gone. He died. completely stupidly.
Completely outside of Ratigan's
Yeah, it wasn't like
anything.
a tripwire he put. No, it was just...
I kind of like the idea of it being like an aneurysm or a heart attack rather than even tripping and falling off Reichenbach Falls, because then it's at least, well, Ratigan could tell himself that he was the one who lured him up to Reichenbach Falls. No, this was just, he was going to have a heart attack anyway.
So, he never beat Basil, and he never will beat Basil, and he never even got to see him die. And Rachel, if they're basically of an age with us, what is a Kohler generational bingo nerd reference that might be relevant here that you thought of?
This is actually, I thought of this comparison, and it was the thing that made the entire Basil dies stupidly and pointlessly story come together, because we were really struggling with, like, how to not just have this be Prince John and Robin Hood all over again. Yeah. And then, my fellow Zennials, I remembered the absolutely genius Batman the Animated Series episode, The Man Who Killed Batman. R.I.P. Kevin Conroy and Arlene Sorkin. We miss you. And in that one, it's this, like, random schmuck who's
just absolute penny ante thug
doing lookout duty for Rupert Thorne. It looks like he accidentally pushed Batman off a building, like, into a propane tank that explodes, and Batman dies.
And, like, all the other people in, like, the job saw this happen, and we're like, oh my gosh, you killed Batman.
And the Joker loses his ever-loving mind. Because he didn't get to be the one who killed Batman.
Like, if Ratigan had killed Basil in his elaborate death trap with theme record playing and, like, picture to have a photo of it happening, he'd be okay.
Honestly, I think he still wouldn't be okay, because he'd be sad after a while, but he'd have something.
Yeah, and, like, he'd tell himself he was happy. He would tell himself he was happy. Mm-hmm. But in this case, he doesn't even get the satisfaction of the framed photo of Basil being killed. And just, golly, that is going to gnaw at him every day of his life. And, like, he can't even enjoy, in the episode Rachel mentioned, like, they rob a jewelry store to see if Batman is going to come stop them, and Joker's just getting increasingly antsy that Batman hasn't showed up yet. And then he orders them to put all this stuff back. It's like, it's not fun anymore.
Right. So we get to see Joker depressed.
Yeah. Like, there's no fun, there's no joie de vivre, there's no spark. So, like, this should be Ratigan ascendant. Like, Basil's out of the picture, and he can be the Napoleon of crime, and he can, like, spread his tentacles of his underworld empire all over this domain, which we'll talk about later. But it's not. Regular crime isn't even fun anymore, because he doesn't have his opponent. Like, he doesn't have anyone to checkmate, or try to checkmate, or to think around, and it's just boring and predictable and too easy, and how is he ever going to prove he's a superior mind? He's not. But part of our thing, you'll notice I kept saying Basil fell off the side of the falls, because there was never a body recovered. Or, like, maybe a body was found days later that's, like, barely recognizable. I'm like, well, I guess it's Basil. Mm-hmm. But Ratigan is absolutely convinced, desperately convinced, that Basil is alive. Mm-hmm. That this was all part of an elaborate plan of Basil's to get him. And that is kind of the only thing keeping him going, is the hope that this is a genius counter move that Basil made to his move, and that he's fooled everyone, and he's fooled everyone, but he hasn't fooled me. He's out there plotting against me right now. Oh, please let him be plotting against me right now. So that's kind of the only thing keeping him going. So this is our sort of reverse Prince John. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Prince John was sort of desperately haunted by the memory of Robin Hood and the terror that Robin Hood is still alive. And he was convinced Robin Hood was dead, but no one believed it. Ratigan is, like, the founder and president of the Basil is secretly alive fan club. Mm-hmm. Like, he's on the message boards writing his elaborate fiction, analyzing every detail of the scenario to prove he's alive.
He's haunted by the terror that Basil is not alive. Mm-hmm.
That was a long wind-up for our torment, but I think you'll agree that's a pretty good torment. So, our element of tragedy and relatability, this is our Less so, because he is so hammy and theatrically over the top. Like, not a lot of ourselves see ourselves in Ratigan, I think. If you do, good for you. You're a really cool person.
As Delicia on Twitter, I do not see myself in Ratigan.
You are a cool person, so.
Thank you.
A couple points that you I think especially the one we've spun out, I think, is a bit more sympathetic character because it's such a delicious torment. Mm-hmm. And number one, we all want attention. We can all kind of understand that basic idea of he has this temper, he's the Hulk. He has this temper he can't control, and that's going to sort of destroy people's respect for him. And that's going to mean that people don't respect him. And even if that's not a thing you understand, you could probably at least empathize and imagine a character that has that kind of tragedy. Mm-hmm. They've just got this temper they can't control, and it means they always lose their cool, which means they're just desperate to sort of prove to earn respect, but they can't. And
also, there's some of us. Again, this might be for my little overachiever self, my little May from Turning Red is coming out here. But listeners, I think at least some of you might also be May from Turning Red. And there was somebody else who wanted to be first chair flute, or who wanted to be valedictorian, or like wanted to get the lead in the school play, whatever it is. You know the thing that you're thinking of.
Right, yeah.
And man alive, didn't it feel good when you beat them, or didn't it feel horrible when they beat you? Yeah. Like, we've, a lot of us have been there. I can't say we've all been there, but a lot of us have been there.
And once again, that even I don't think I have a specific rival from high school.
I know exactly who I'm thinking of.
I know you're thinking of too. But even if you're like me and you can feel that. You can feel you can imagine a rivalry. And you can imagine there's someone, and like, one of you is the smartest person in London, one of you is the second smartest person in Mousedom, and you're pretty sure what you want to be true, but you really want to prove it's you. That you're number one and they're number two, and that you are the superior mind. And the idea that then you can never do that, you can never have this sort of definitive resolution. Like, I hope with our description of Basil's pointless death and what this means for Ratigan, you had that little wince of like, oh, that's rough, buddy.
Yeah. That's
rough.
Fair.
Oh, wow, that would suck. Like, that'd be horrible. So, as I said, a smaller and I think a little less heartstring-tugging element of tragedy and relatability than some of our darklords, but hopefully enough to give you that just wince of sympathy for the villain that I think all the great darklords should at least elicit. And then we have another area to expand a lot, another area that's one of our main reasons we wanted to do this movie. The domain reflecting the Darklord and the personality. So, Rachel, what do we got here? We got a baby potential horror setting?
I don't know, London by Gaslight.
Yeah, London by Gaslight, people.
No one's ever been able to get any horror out of London by Gaslight. Yeah, no, it's Victorian London. Yeah. You've got so much to work with here.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that we're not going to expand on in a massive detail for the domain section because we are going off of what we saw in the movie. Mm-hmm. But you can do a lot with these London by Gaslight themes. You can dive into a lot of Jekyll and Hyde stuff.
Yes.
That
Victorian London plus Incredible Hulk / werewolf equals Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah. And so there's so much of like the themes of repression, the themes of respectability, the themes of this seedy underbelly. You can have it be that there are like people who look so respectable and who seem like the most upstanding citizens, but they're on Ratigan's payroll. Lots of people leading double lives, lots of crime. It's super easy to do a Jekyll and Hyde thing here.
It's super easy to, if you wanted to really up the sympathy, we're not super upping the sympathy because he's a glorious, hammy villain, but to have it be this sort of a fundamental hypocrisy of people's kind of judgment and rejection of him for being a were-rat. Like, to say, no, sort of deep down, they are just as bad. They are just as sort of base and feral and animalistic as he is. and it's just to sort of make themselves feel better. They're rejecting him as monstrous and as base because he's a were-rat.
Mm-hmm. But deep down, they're also rats.
Yeah, deep down, they're all rats.
And if you're hearing Jekyll and Hyde duality, especially my fellow grognards, and you're thinking, that sounds like Nova Vasa, put a pin in that.
We're gonna get to that.
Also, if you're thinking London by Gaslight, that sounds like Paradon. Put a pin in that, too.
This is what's got along like the old material stuff. Because, this is...
It's not even my birthday.
Yeah, this is... We'll talk about there's more in the old material section. But London by Gaslight, Victorian London, is such an iconic horror milieu. Not just an iconic horror location in terms of it looks spooky, but it's got these really rich themes and really legendary works of the genre to draw on as themes and inspiration that, it is a huge gap in the 5e Ravenloft. There's not a kind of London by Gaslight, Victorian-y, steampunky, smoky, dark megalopolis horror setting to do.
Zaricia is the, island cluster that Paradon was originally in. I think it was Zaricia that got the one paragraph write-up. And there were a bunch of people commenting that it is a crime that Zaricia didn't get a, full write-up because it's such a iconic Ravenloft type setting.
And fortunately, that leaves a place for us, a absence, a gap for us to fill.
It's not like Cinderella, who we're well, new Daemon Lou.
Yeah, right.
What else are we gonna
check.
We're still working on it because
trying.
It's iconic Disney, but everything we come up with, Daemon Lou
remains great, but yeah.
Anyway.
Daemon Lou, do that.
Yeah.
But as much as our heart longs to start digging into the setting and about a great horror Ravenloft setting this is, we are going to finish our sort of discussion of our Darklord, who is the sort of reflection, the shadow side, the Hyde to Basil's Jekyll of this steampunky Victorian London by Gaslight setting.
We are bound to our format as much as inside we are feral rats who desire to do things in whatever order we want. We must keep ourselves together and continue along our outline to discuss Ratigan's special Darklord powers.
Right. So the Darklord write-up for him, this is one where the stat block similar to is really easy. He has stats similar to a were-rat. One obvious change is the intelligence, that he is the Napoleon of crime. He is a genius. He is either slightly smarter or slightly less smart than Basil, depending on who you ask. The Dark Powers have their answer. But easy int 18. Easy int 18. Honestly, this is one where you, give the NPC an int of, 20, and, you maybe wouldn't be overdoing it.
Yeah.
But easy int 18... And the great thing is, presumably, you are not a Napoleon of crime. If you are, please use some of your ill-gotten gains to donate to us. And that tricky problem of, you want to have a villain that's a super cool, chess master, manipulator, Moriarty-esque figure, but that's, not you. But you have that built-in advantage of overhearing the PC's conversations.
Knowing their plans.
And normally that would be the most annoying thing in the world. That'd be a classic gaming horror story, that the GM would always have the villain know the PC's plans. But in this case, it might still be annoying, but it's Moriarty.
Spoilers for challenges, by the way. Anytime you kind of go, oh my gosh, that sounds so annoying, put a pin in that. Yeah. We're aware that it can be annoying if it's improperly used. We're going to get into some great detail in challenges, because, man, having Moriarty as your big bad has the potential to be awful.
And also, an obvious one, to kind of go off the Basil surprise party, is that he gets advantage on initiative, he anticipates you, a lot of times he'll get that surprise round. And the nice thing, Rachel thought of this, that he does not have that in were-rat form. And when he were-rats out, when he turns into this hulking beast, he actually has disadvantage. He has the regular were-rat, int and wisdom stats. He has disadvantage on int or wisdom rolls. He has disadvantage on initiative rolls because he is just this feral monster now.
And actually, as we were discussing this and talking about his, hulking out and going totally feral as a were-rat, that you could even say that that's a thing that's happened to him since he became the Darklord. That's a curse from the Dark Powers.
Ooh, I like that.
And it used to be that he was able to control himself more in were-rat form in the Dark Powers. So let's do something about that.
I think no. And obviously, sort of the one aspect of the Napoleon of crime is the strategic genius. The other is the giant army, that he has this enormous underworld network. He is the spider in the center of a web that spans the domain, from the, like, height of corrupt government officials embezzling millions to the, petty housebreakers and vice peddlers and seedy dive bars. He has his finger in all that, and all answers to him. And to quote Dr. Facilier, our source of our torment description, the real power in this world isn't magic, it's money, buckets of it. And he has this just massive network of money, of power, of corruption, and that is as effective as any kind of magic ability he might have. And we mentioned we're coming back to, at long last, we're circling back to one of the things we said we'd circle back to, and that is Felicia. And Felicia's amazing. And we have to have a version of Felicia. And we were looking for a good version, and we came up with just for base monster manual, probably a wyvern. Mm-hmm. That's very dragon-like.
Because Felicia's a dragon. Look at her. She's a dragon.
She's obviously a dragon, yeah. But D&D dragon is this kind of super wise, powerful, like, sentient creature. It doesn't quite work for what they do with Felicia. Felicia's still kind of a pet, and that it's a little too, like, setting disruptive, I think, to have, like, a random dragon in Victorian London. So it's a wyvern, which gives us the more animalistic dragon, but in the write-up they even mention, if you raise the wyvern from an egg, then it'll be this, like, fiercely loyal bodyguard protector, although you have to be really careful because plenty of people have done that and still gotten eaten. But you know what? Ratigan isn't going to be eaten.
Yeah.
Like, he's smart enough, wise enough, strong-willed enough that he just has the, like, loyal protector wyvern. And he's got this little bell, and he can ring it, and where it sort of calls out wherever Felicia is. She hears it, and she knows where he is, and she knows to come to him.
It's like a magic sending bell.
Yeah, D&D stuff.
D&D stuff.
We've got the other sort of big minion that does a lot that we see in the movie is Fidget. Well, so if you want to have Fidget, sure, he's got Fidget. It was tricky, but then Rachel Googled it, and there are werebat stats in Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So you can pull that out, you can have your werebat. And then finally to bring in a thing from the book. In the books later, he gets this sort of right-hand man named Captain Duran, who's sort of the Eve Titus Great Mouse Detective version of Sebastian Duran. And so that's great. Let's have that. It absolutely makes sense he'd have his own version of Watson.
Yes.
His / Dawson. That he would have his, like, loyal right-hand man who, taking from the Sherlock stuff, is this, like, amazing sniper. Mm-hmm. And that is just a great, like, thing to throw into the PC's encounter with Ratigan. Is way off in the rocks. There's this amazing sniper and shooting them with his longbow. And then finally, closing the border. Sorry, we don't have a good one here.
Yeah, there was nothing remotely suggestive in the movie for what to do. So, it's London by Gaslight. Thick fog.
Thick fog. Yeah, London fog.
London fog.
It's a brand of Coke. It's that famous. Like, if you really want to get crazy, you could have actually bringing in the smog and the idea that it's actually poison. Like, it's this incredibly thick fog that actually is, like, toxic to breathe. Kind of go back to sort of original Barovia, Curse of Strahd, Castle Ravenloft type stuff. I believe it was in the 50s they had the big problem with air pollution. There actually were these, like, clouds of smog that were, like, killing people.
Jeez.
So you're totally justified in having it be actually full-on poison. Just, coal smoke and gas fumes filling the mists and making it impassable. But it's fog. They can't all be winners. So the final thing that we like to do for the write-up is, as I mentioned, the style of the write-up in Vampire Guide to Ravenloft, and there's always, for the Darklord section, the role-playing trait, the ideal, the bond, and the flaw. And they always have them in the form of quotes from the Darklord. And so we always have that fun challenge, fun in quotes sometimes, of...
Snow White.
Gosh. Of coming up with quotes the character says that express those things. And in this case, I'm the one that really, dived into this. So if you're all right with this as a format, I do have a collection of quotes, but I even have, a couple options for each of these to sort of talk through.
Kind of like we did for Frola?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first of these is our trait, and I have a couple of suggestions, and a lot of this was... there's not a lot of making of stuff I could find. But there was one clip of Vincent Price got repeated in a couple different making of things. And I'd love to hear more from him, which is a shame this is what I made when I could find. And it was him saying, Ratigan's really fun to play. And he says, the thing about like a villain like this is he's also an actor. And he's playing the part of the great villain. So I wanted something, that's something you can use. Like, this is what your PCs are going to encounter. Your interactions with Ratigan are going to be this guy playing the part of the great villain.
His theatricality is such a huge part of the character, yeah.
So, the first one, and a very strong contender, I think. Oh, I love it when I'm nasty. Because it's just, so the deliberate theatricality and the enjoying the theatricality, the reveling in it. I have the power! I am supreme! This is my kingdom!
That one I think is a little too generic.
Yeah.
It's like you can see Prince John saying that too, so.
You don't know what a delightful dilemma it was trying to decide on the most appropriate method for your demise. Oh, I had so many ingenious ideas I didn't know which to choose, so I decided to use them all.
That's a very strong contender.
Because it's just so ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous.
But so great.
So great. So, oh man.
That whole scene, I think everything you, as a GM, need to know about playing Ratigan is like, this is what he would do. He would have a, 7-stage death trap with a song. He went in a recording booth, recorded a song mocking Basil, and then also set up a camera to take a photo of him dying.
And he's so pleased with himself.
Yes.
He has all these ingenious ideas. Like all his ideas are so good. And
just I decided to use them all. It's such a Ratigan over the top super villainy moment. But that's in the past. This time, nothing, not even Basil can stand in my way. All will bow before me. And finally, poor Basil. Oh, he is in for a surprise.
I gotta go with the delightful dilemma.
It's so good.
Because it needs to be something beyond just the, I will rule, I'll be supreme, da-da-da-da-da. Because that's a pretty generic thing.
It's a very long trait, but...
Yes.
So, ideal, I feel like we've, There's really only one possibility.
Only one. The first time we watched this, when we didn't even know when we were planning on doing the episode, a year ago. The ideal is the superior mind has triumphed. I've won.
I also had the world's greatest criminal mind, which is definitely, that's a thing. It's important to him. He makes his henchmen sing a song about how he's the world's greatest criminal mind. But the ideal specifically, even though no, it's not just that he is he has to triumph.
Yes.
The superior mind has triumphed. So, then we have Bond.
Gotta be something with Basil.
Yes, it has to be something with Basil. This is, I got a couple of possibilities. And there's Basil, but then there's also the criminalness, the Bond for his, but it has to be something with Basil. So I did have my friends were about to embark on the most odious, the most evil, the most diabolical scheme of my illustrious career. His thing is, this is the most evil plan imaginable.
That also actually would be a contender for trait, I would say.
No, I think I'm going to... Well, what do you think? That... A crime to top all crimes. A crime that will live in infamy.
Oh, man.
Yeah, right?
Because it's a very showman-like...
And it's less specific than the...
specific.
Okay.
Honestly, I think that's a better trait.
And just, I know we're not doing this one for Bond. I know it has to be Basil. But I could not have... Oh, Felicia, my precious, my baby. Your daddy's little honey bun. Enjoy her tasty treat. In the write-up and the list of powers, having, Felicia is going to be daddy's little honey bun.
Yes.
I got 3 Basil possibilities. And one is and this is the one I like the most. There's no escape this time, Basil.
Ooh.
Because that even, the this time... It's not just, it's about the whole relationship.
Yeah.
It's about the whole history. It's about there's no escape this time, Basil. It's I've beaten you. I'm going to beat you. There's no escape. I've got you in my trap. And this time I love to suggesting that whole relationship.
Yes.
No, all the other times
you've escaped. Gotten away, but not this time.
Not this time.
It kind of is expressing the ongoing, what he sees happening. He thinks that, Basil thinks that he's escaped by faking his own death.
Right, yes.
There's no escape this time.
We've also got the, oh, poor Basil, oh, he is in for a surprise. Just because I it's such a, oh, poor Basil, he is in for a surprise. It's the delicious, he's just my worthy opponent. I, feel that little bit of sympathy, almost pity for I've so outmaneuvered him, I almost feel sorry for him. And then finally, for years, that insufferable pipsqueak has interfered with my plans, and I haven't had a moment's peace of mind. And that's almost the obsession. The nice, obsession of, I can't have peace of mind. I can't sort of relax, or Maleficent style. I haven't had a good night's sleep in 16 years because Basil's out there interfering with my plans.
Yeah. I think the poor Basil one is for when he's kind of feeling on top of things. So I don't think that works for him as he is.
Yeah, so for Bond, what do you think's the better about Basil?
Yeah, so I'm thinking either that there's no escape this time or the insufferable pipsqueak.
That one's more torment. But I kind of like the simplicity of there's no escape this time, Basil.
Yeah, and even that it's so much the him being in denial about Basil being dead.
Yeah.
It's so, it's there's the simplicity, and also it's the... But there's no escape, because he died. He had an aneurysm.
Flaw is another one where, kind of like with Ideal, where I didn't do a ton of prep, because I think there's a pretty obvious thing for his flaw. And we've even mentioned it in terms of his being a big part of his torment. So, just to throw out some options, because there's no I in team. There's no I in co-host. And one, it's the scene where they're on the airship. Fidget says we need to lighten the load, and he says, oh, you want to lighten the load? Excellent idea. And then dumps Fidget over. And that's a little of the being so cruel to his subordinates. And, they're so disposable. I could see when Basil comes in, we have the bravo, a marvelous performance. I was expecting you 15 minutes earlier. Trouble with the chemistry set, my boy? Because we have the arrogance. And that's going to be a flaw, and that's going to be something you can role play with, is the arrogance. But the one that immediately popped out to me was the, what did you call me? I am not a rat!
Yeah, that is it.
And then if we do the, because that is the ... so oh, he didn't say anything, Professor. You have to cut the hench things. We do, what do you call me? I am not a rat. And do that in all caps. And then the, oh, my dear Bartholomew, I'm afraid you've gone and upset me. You know what happens when someone upsets me. So I don't know if you want to include that, end point there. With the, oh, my dear Bartholomew. Or if you just want the, what did you call me? I'm not a rat. I think when it's just,
what did you call me? I'm not a rat.
Ah, okay, love it. Okay, cool. So, because that's in all. Then you have the kind of him regaining his cool. And with this flaw, we've got the great, no, he's not getting it. Make sure it's all caps. So.
Yeah.
Did you call me? I am not a rat.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. That's what it comes down to.
Yes.
And you've even got the screaming, I am not a rat. Losing his temper, starting to rat out as he's screaming, I am not a rat. So cool. All right. That gives us our write-up for our Darklord Ratigan. And honestly, if it were just a blah setting, but you had this glorious, hammy Vincent Price, Machiavellian, ridiculous death trap bad guy Darklord, that would be worth it.
Yes.
But it's not just that, because we also have, as we had mentioned up top, one of the iconic horror settings, and an iconic horror, it's not only an iconic horror setting, it is an iconic horror setting that is not currently there in the currently 5e Ravenloft canon. So we are quite delighted to tell you more about this iconic horror setting in a section we like to call
The Land. The Land. Although Londinium contains many lavish country estates, windswept moors, and lonely chalk cliffs, the heart of the domain is its eponymous fog-choked city. A center of commerce, academics, and culture to rival Levkarest or Illaluk, Londinium has a seedier side lurking just below its surface. The obvious divide is between the prim prosperity of the uptown and the wretched squalor of the slums. I saw a gentlewoman feeding fresh meat to her lapdog in the park, while, a mere block away, children scavenged for discarded potato parings in an alley. Even beyond that divide, however, was a general sense of duplicity. Most of the people I met greeted me with cheerful smiles or impeccable manners, but something about them made me instinctively eye their hands in case a knife appeared in them. Perhaps this is merely paranoia. Give me time, and I believe I could find a piece of gossip putting every citizen of Londinium on Ratigan's payroll. In fact, I found many specific rumors surrounding individual citizens and have attached them for my patron's edification. I found the talk about the true ownership of the rat trap particularly engrossing. Much of the gossip, of course, swirls around whatever happens to be the most recent crime spree in Londinium. In this case, it was a series of kidnappings. From a match girl who had not appeared at her usual street corner, to a young duke who had been snatched beneath his governess's very nose, highborn and lowborn children alike were vanishing, and the police could find no pattern to the disappearances. Any faith I might have had in Londinium's law enforcement vanished at that point, for with the time I spent in the public records office, some of the names were familiar to me. All of the kidnapped children were related to a former client of Ratigan's deceased rival, Basil. In fact, the connection was so obvious, as were the distinctive peg-legged tracks leading away from the kidnapping sites, that only two possibilities presented themselves. Either Ratigan's criminal genius had been dramatically overstated, or he wanted to be caught. So our domain that we're looking at, we're calling it Londinium, and it's a city-state. We've got London to be the big city-state, right. But we also have the surrounding region because we want there to be the small villages, we want there to be moors, so you can do Hound of the Baskervilles right. If you want.
We want you to have, like, the, tiny, mysterious seaside village with a dark secret, like any Sherlock Holmes potential setting, not just the city.
Yeah. If you wanted to, because Mordant is also kind of filling this, English countryside niche, if you wanted to have, Londinium is this big city that's right next to Mordant, then you could do that and just have all your Hound of Baskervilles nonsense over in Mordant. That's fine, too. But the way that we're doing it is going to be having it as entirely its own thing. Big old city, small seaside villages with mysterious secrets.
Moors. Forests, if you want them. Whatever you like.
Yeah.
England's got a lot of stuff.
England does have a lot of stuff, including a lot of fabulous Victorian literature, all of which we were drawing upon.
Yes, indeed.
Domain. So we're really, again, looking at Victorian London. It's an iconic horror setting. We're pulling a lot for my fellow grognards, if you remember Mask of the Red Death.
Yeah.
Which...
R.I.P. Gone too soon.
Gone before it truly had the chance to live.
Yeah.
So, if you're not familiar with Mask of the Red Death, quick sidebar tangent, it was basically trying to do Ravenloft on Earth. It was also called Gothic Earth. So that way you could do, there's London, there's actual Transylvania,
right?
All this other stuff, but with Frankenstein and Dracula and Moriarty.
Moriarty is one of the canon antagonist NPCs in the campaign.
And we're going to be getting back to how they do Moriarty later, because it's really cool, and it was an inspiration for how we wanted to do Ratigan. So, if you were into Mask of the Red Death / Gothic Earth, or you're like, hey, that sounds cool, you can just plop all of that into Londinium and have a wee of a time. You've got the fog, you've got gaslights, you can do Jack the Ripper,
right.
Especially, Paradon / Zarisia is already doing Jack the Ripper, but if you're not doing anything with that, then you could put it here if you wanted to very easily.
Right, and the fact there is very little, it's mentioned in the 5e write-up for Zarisia, but very, 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 very little, so that's another one of those, big conceptual kind of horror canon spaces that the existing 5e canon Ravenloft is a Jack the Ripper.
It's such a waste. I cannot figure out why they didn't do a full domain write-up for Paradon. Anyway. And then, again, we've got Jekyll and Hyde. Since we have Ratigan as the Darklord, you can really be hitting those duality and hypocrisy themes. If you watched the gloriously silly, cheesy, over-the-top Jekyll and Hyde musical, as you know, man is not one but two. He is evil and good.
Dear listener, you've got to imagine David Hasselhoff is singing these lines, because that is the person. I'm not kidding. This isn't a weirdo meme. This is David Hasselhoff as Jekyll and Hyde in Jekyll and Hyde.
Doing a surprisingly good job.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, I think. If you want to check it out.
If we have any Frank Wildhorn fans out here, I apologize, but Frank Wildhorn, who wrote Jekyll and Hyde, he's the guy that Andrew Lloyd Webber fans, such as myself, I'm not just talking out of my rear end here, this is just science, we say, You guys think that we're just cheesy and all about spectacle? Look over this guy! I apologize, Frank Weller.
Yes. Let us know on Patreon. Let us know. Get a Patreon so you can chastise us on Patreon.
I do love it, though. Jekyll and Hyde is so ridiculous. In any event, so you can take those themes and you can have kind of that idea of the duality, the hypocrisy. Everyone is secretly on Ratigan's payroll. Like, whether it's because they're twisted and evil on the inside or because he has something on and is holding it over them. There are so few people who you can find who are truly trustworthy. You can play with all of those themes. Right. Really fun. You're also totally justified bringing in some light steampunk elements. There is the robot clockwork
there's a robot queen.
Yeah, there's a dirigible. There's, incidentally, dear listeners, I'm stumbling over my tongue here. I'm recovering from COVID, and I am all hopped up on Dayquil, so I just called her the robot clean. And if anything else like that happens, Dayquil o'clock.
and even a lot of modern iterations of any of that kind of Victoriana will usually have a level of steampunk if they're trying to kind of be a slightly fantastic Victoriana. So, like, I believe both Robert Downey Jr. Holmes movies have, like, steampunk elements. Like, the villains have some kind of, like, advanced contraption that's not really possible for Victorian technology, but kind of is part of their plan. It's almost weirder to have a Victorian horror setting that didn't have some light steampunk elements at this point.
Yeah. So we're not going to flesh this out a whole lot because there's not much of it in the movie, and you don't need us to tell you how to do hypocrisy and steampunk.
Yeah.
Those are such broad, like, delicious themes that lend themselves to so many story hooks and plot hooks and storytelling. And they don't really connect to Ratigan and Basil and Flaversham and all of that stuff.
And, like, honestly, I don't think we need to give a ton of super specific setting details because if you are a horror GM, there is a good chance you can, like, come up with whatever you need a Victorian London setting to have. Whatever kind of weird, spooky stuff, resources, NPCs to interact with. You can come up with those. You can find them in any number of sources.
Yeah.
There are a couple of specific sort of NPCs and locations, we touched on some of these already, that are directly from the movie. So that is something kind of relevant to our specific version of Londinium. And the first, we kind of have 3 locations, and they kind of have that sort of duality of that we're talking about. And the first is Basil's office. And that's 221B Baker Street, and how excited are your players going to be when they see that 221B Baker Street door. And so we are imagining that, Basil's gone, everyone believes he's dead, Dawson is carrying on the fight. So he's still trying to oppose Ratigan, he's trying to use, like, Basil's files and what he's learned from Basil, and that could be good because, if Dawson's sort of like the contact NPC, the quest giver, then it's like he's not going to outshine the PCs. Like, he has all that stuff you want from a good, like, contact NPC. He has the files, he has the local, contacts, he knows the area, but he's going to be the one that are like, what could it mean? Here are the clues, but I can't understand them. And then the PCs get to step in and kind of play the Holmes role of being the ones that piece it all together. And he, accepts that Sherlock's dead, Basil's dead. Don't know how I made that mistake. But he accepts that Basil's dead, but he, like, secretly hopes that it is out there, that this is some kind of plan. And then another really cool thought, if you want to advance the timeline, we didn't say how long between Great Mouse Detective and Basil's quote-unquote death at Reichenbach Falls.
Or how long Basil's been
quote-unquote dead. Yes, or how long quote-unquote has been dead. You could have a sort of teenage or young adult Olivia Flaversham. Just a, like, spunky adventurer. Adventuress. Enola Holmes. Yeah, watch Enola Holmes. Like that. That she's just sort of this spunky adventuress, like, this whole, you could do a whole Basil took her under his wing and made her his protege. And so, once again, you could have someone that's a very useful, like, local contact, but it's not Basil. So it's like, yeah, no, she does need some help from the PCs to do all the things that Basil would be able to do on his own. And this actually is touching on, there was, I don't remember the name of the guy, but he was one of the producers of the 2017 DuckTales reboot, which is amazing. And he actually pitched a Rescue Rangers reboot, where it was going to be that the reveal was the Rescue Rangers were actually founded by Olivia Flaversham. And she sort of became Basil's protege, founded the Rescue Rangers, and then the story was going to involve, like, Fat Cat trying to get finding some old plan of Ratigan's.
Nice.
Some kind of old, like, destroy humanity plan that Ratigan had come up with but never been able to execute. So, if you're a certain type of nerd that just really, like, was a really cool thing to hear those inexplicable morass of names. But yeah, so I think that's another one of those kind of NPCs that a lot of PC groups would really glom to. And they kind of they like her. They like how spunky she was. They'd kind of be protective of her, especially if they'd seen the movie and kind of remembered, sort of quote unquote, knowing her as a little girl. And they could have a lot of fun going on adventures with Olivia Flaversham. And then we have her father. And he is this genius artificer. And that could be another great NPC ally, because he could give you the loot. He could give you the gear. He could be kind of like Maurice in our Beauty and the Beast episode. You should listen to it. It's great. That he can be this kind of giving magic items to the PCs. And it's really easy, as we said in that episode, to take any number of magic items and reskin them as clockwork mechanisms. Like these sort of Magitech artificer things. So he gives them, it's the write-up is a boots of spider climb, but it's really like a backpack that spider legs come out. Or, gives them, it's a wand of fireballs, but it's like a proto-flamethrower that he built that he can give the PCs. And it's never a bad thing to have a NPC that can be the magic item giver.
Yeah. Especially
if he's, sort of the, I recognize you as great heroes and we've got to defeat Ratigan and I'm going to give you all these weapons I've been making. That's our good. Those are our forces of good. Those are the forces of light and justice. Now to go to the duality, we have, of course, Ratigan's lair. And this itself reflects the duality. That in the movie, it's like a storage, like a wine cellar in the sewers. And so it's very easy to say, no, he's taken this part of the sewers and converted them into this luxurious secret hidden lair that he can then use, and his men can use the sewers to clow through the city. And it touches on that rat imagery and the sort of secret tunnel, them scurrying around the city. You've got the duality of it's like the sewers, it's the worst part of town, but it's this palace inside with all his treasures and luxuries. It makes a fantastic dungeon. You have that he has prepared defenses. You could have kind of a version of the death traps you made for Basil. So all these traps, there's his minions, there's Felicia, a sort of Victorian London sewer chasing a criminal mastermind in his lair is just a natural dungeon. That's going to be a great dungeon.
I want to go through that dungeon.
Right, yeah, it's going to be a cool dungeon. And then just to have kind of one more location, we sort of get us in Buckingham Palace, which do whatever you want with that. We have the Rat Trap. And the Rat Trap is this sort of sleazy pub that Basil tracks Fidget to in the first part of the movie. And that just gives you, it's a classic, it's sort of Victoriana, mystery, horror kind of set piece of the sleazy tavern, the sleazy pub by the docks with all the sailors with their tattoos and their eye patches. And
you gotta put on your false mustache and
picking their teeth with their daggers and glaring at you. And that this is not just a slummy, sleazy place. This is clearly part of Ratigan's network. This is a organization that answers to Ratigan. They drug the drinks. When Basil's asking about Ratigan, Fidget, there's a trap door he uses to get down to the sewers to then go to Ratigan's lair, that they follow him. If you want that sort of underworld location, that place to use that criminal background for your rogue, or that thieves can't, and then to have that, this is sort of how criminally you can hook into Ratigan's network. There you go. It's the Rat Trap. It's a sleazy pub by the docks. So, we have given you a tiny taste of what is potentially a massive, expansive mystery horror setting. This is one of those things where it's London. You could have just an entire city book of just locations and NPCs and factions and agendas and conspiracies and hidden secrets and all sorts of things.
This is what Ratigan has on this person. This is what Ratigan has on that person. This is how this person's trying to overthrow Ratigan.
Yeah. Here's this secret occult item. Here's this secret occult item. Here's this secret society. Here's this sort of occult gentleman's club that dabbles in infernalism. And
Here's the domain equivalent of Irene Adler. What's
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah, what's Irene Adler up to? Here's Jack the Ripper. Here's who that is for this. Here's the Ripper of this setting. But once again, you don't need us to do that. There's any number of sources you could go to get a giant Victorian London right up like that. And then just, the Moriarty's got him Ratigan. It's one of the only changes you need to make in any kind of Holmes setting that anyone else has come up with. So, rich, expansive setting, full adventure. Little spoiler alert, you could have an entire campaign here easily. That nowhere but this city. But what kind of things would be in that entire campaign? Rachel, what do you do with it?
Dread possibilities. My first impulse was to tell the authorities what I had deduced of Ratigan's scheme. However, given the rumors of widespread corruption throughout Londinium, I suspected that such a report would make it to Ratigan's ears well before it reached anyone who would take useful action. On its face, rescuing these frightened, stolen children from an unknown fate had nothing to do with researching the domain. However, it meant a chance at coming face to face with Ratigan, and my patron was so dreadfully disappointed with me for not securing an interview with De La Cruz in my last report. The peg-legged tracks were so obvious that they were clearly a trap. I do hope my patron will not scold me for using invisibility to conceal myself as I followed them, in order that Ratigan might be less likely to detect my approach. Perhaps this was an everyday problem for which my poor mind could not formulate a solution. Nonetheless, I instead chose to make use of the tools that my patrons specifically gave me for carrying out tasks such as these. I was able to slip past his henchmen easily. At the time, I thought that this was either a testament to their inefficacy or further proof that I was walking into a trap, but I now know the true reason. I eventually followed the tracks to a river dock, where I found the children in a bizarre death trap. Each hung in a cage over the water, which was red and slimy with chum, shark fins occasionally cresting the surface. The cages were held in place by a system of pulleys, and it was clear that their captor intended to drop them in one at a time. The captor in question, a hirsute man whose massive body strained the seams of his elegant suit, was eyeing a gold pocket watch while more of his lackeys manned the pulley systems. "Basil will be here at any minute," sneered the man who could only have been Professor Ratigan. "I flushed him out by capturing a single brat in that Faversham incident. Imagine how he'll come running for a dozen of them." His henchmen had not missed me because they were unobservant. They had missed me because they were watching specifically for the deceased Basil of Baker Street. Perhaps Basil was a ghost, or perhaps Ratigan had some intelligence suggesting he was alive. Regardless, I could not stand by while he lowered those cages one by one, waiting for his rival to appear. I had seen portraits of Basil, enough that my silent image was a passable imitation in the foggy darkness. When Ratigan saw the image, he froze, and his expression was not one of belligerence or anger. It was pure, joyous triumph. Shouting for his minions to follow him, he dashed toward the shape. A silent image is not a powerful illusion spell, particularly against a mind as potent as Ratigan's was said to be, yet he continued his fruitless search for Basil long enough for me to free all of the children and escort them to safety. If Ratigan was duped for so long, it could only be that he wanted to believe my illusion was true.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell. So, why did you come to Londinium? Why didn't you come to Londinium?
Right?
My gosh.
It's one of the mega cities of the world.
Yeah, so it's got a library that might have some of the clues you need. It's got archives, clues, magic items, all kinds of stuff. It's got, all kinds of cultural things that your PCs might be interested in. Why do you go to London?
Why do you go to London?
To see the sights.
Like, it could be if there's some kind of connected with some kind of entertainer or theater troupe. Of course they're going to come to Londinium to perform. If they're connected with any kind of magic, anything, you could have the Londinium version of the British Museum that has just the occult loot of 100 domains.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that as a plot hook.
Yeah.
They're gonna have like all these really cheesed off darklords.
Yeah.
To go get their treasure.
Get their stuff back, yeah.
That's where Antipatska is.
Yeah.
The British Museum stole it.
It's in the Harakir exhibit. No, it's not even in the exhibit. It's in the storage room.
We're sorry, Antipatska.
with hundreds of other precious artifacts from Harakir. Like Rachel said, why would you come to London? Now it could be that reason.
Mm-hmm. But if you want to get more specific,
right.
if there's not a thing where you're like, oh, well, this is how the information they're looking for could be in this big city, or the person they're looking for could be in this big city, which, gives you a ton of possibilities on its own. You could be chasing agents of Ratigan from other domains. Ratigan, he's got this far-reaching spiderweb empire, so maybe he's trying to expand into other domains, and you're chasing the people over there. Maybe you've been hired to investigate rumors that Basil survived.
Ooh.
But, plot twist, you were hired by Ratigan.
Yes! So good. And that's you've already getting that adventure right there. You think like Ratigan's the big bad. Oh, we're investigating Basil survived. They're going to be opposing Ratigan. We're working with this Ratigan guy. Then you have that plot twist of Ratigan's the one that actually hired them.
Because no one wants Basil to be alive more than Ratigan does. And that's kind of looking ahead to the overall shape that a campaign set in Londinium could take. Is you could find out, the entire campaign could be that you're looking for Basil, you're fighting Ratigan, and then, plot twist, you find out that you were actually hired by Ratigan to begin with, look for Basil. Another possibility that a Londinium campaign could look like, we mentioned we were going to be getting back to what they did with Moriarty in Mask of the Red Death. In Mask of the Red Death, they had Moriarty at kind of a similar place to where Ratigan is now. That's
kind of our inspiration.
Yeah. That Reichenbach Falls happened, and Holmes is gone, and Moriarty is bored out of his ever-loving mind. And what he needs is a new worthy opponent. And so they have... This was actually... I had for a while been hoping I could run Mask of the Red Death, and if I had ever gotten to run it, this is what I was going to do for a campaign. So I love this idea. So they have this whole idea in the book of he's going to need worthy opponents. And so he's going to have to kind of look at these people who have a lot of potential and start slowly training them from the ground up.
Right.
Teaching them how to be his opponents, sending people after them, starting small. He doesn't want to throw the big guns at them right away. He doesn't want to burn them out right off the bat. Get them to foil some minor plans, and then eventually beginning, bigger and bigger and bigger, until finally he gets them to the point where they are the same character level as him. I mean, where they are the same
intelligence
level as him, and he truly has a worthy opponent on his hands. So you could have a thing where Ratigan has actually brought the PCs in, or maybe he didn't even bring them in to begin with. Maybe they came in originally chasing his people, and defeated some of his people, and Ratigan was like, oh, they surprised me. Nobody's surprised me in a while.
Yeah.
And so he starts taking an interest in them and throwing his men at them and deliberately bringing them in a Riddler style to be kind of investigating his plans, because he's trying to get them to be his new Basil.
Yes. You could even combine that with some of the kind of using them to search for Basil. They get hired by mysterious Ratigan guy to a mysterious were-rat to search for clues of Basil, and they get tangled up with Ratigan, and even now it was on purpose, because that means Basil's more likely to trust them. If I am your enemy, it means Basil's more likely to come out of hiding, get in touch with you, and make contact with you. So it's all part of his plan to get Basil to reveal he's alive. So that could make an excellent core framework. And this is another one of those where there's a lot you could do in this setting, but really to kind of do the capital L Londinium, it's going to be tangling with Ratigan. So there's so many potential plot hooks. We are going to give you a chart in the write-up of Ratigan schemes, and including stealing the crown jewels, because of course.
Of course.
And then the idea is
trying to resurrect Basil's ghost, because if he is dead,
yes,
he won't be for long, by golly.
Or even some kind of necromantic ritual to know for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find out for sure if Basil's dead by seeking out the other side, and if he is dead, I'm gonna bring him back to life, so I can beat him, so I can kill him again. And so that can be then leading up to some kind of, like, grandiose plan. Like, and the thing is, this Ratigan's motivation gives you this kind of natural narrative arc of, if he's getting more and more, like, frustrating and despondent, it could lead to a natural climax of, like, some absurd supervillain plan. He's like, well, if this doesn't get him out, nothing will.
Like, clearly Basil's just playing dead, but if I blow up all of Londinium,
yes,
that'll make him come out to stop me.
If I, like, punch a hole to the land of the dead, or if I replace the queen with a robot, or if I, plan to destroy the entire city, then that'll force his hand. He'll have to come out of hiding to stop me. And so just, once again, just natural narrative arc, you're tangling with Ratigan, a number of schemes, building to a climax, building to some sort of Vincent Price supervillainy that then the PCs have to step in and stop.
And then, for, like, side stuff, for things that aren't directly dealing with Ratigan, anything dealing with duality, there's so many monsters you could bring in. You can have, like, any kind of lycanthrope who's hiding what they are. Like, Vampire the Masquerade is built on this nonsense. Like, you can have vampires and things that are pretending to be human but aren't. You can just have, like, crooked humans. You could have a thing where maybe someone that you're dealing with is secretly, like, a car god operative or something like that, who's trying to bust Ratigan's ring. Like, anything dealing with duality, anything dealing with people leading a double life, you can bring that in.
Even if, like, Ratigan is not directly involved.
Yeah.
That made me think you could do a really cool kind of combining Jack the Ripper and the Jekyll and Hyde, and not in the usual way, but what you just said with having to be like, he's a werewolf. Yeah. That, like, Dr. Jekyll legitimately, like, blacks out and wakes up covered in blood, and it's not like the sort of deliberate, taking serum and then letting the consequences happen, but, like, legitimately is not sure what is happening, and it's that the Ripper is a werewolf who is shocking. And then, your classic, like, puts, all of these murders are on the full moon. And the PCs are like, oh, dang, where's the silver shop? So, just so much here. As I said, little sneak preview, this is one of the richest settings we've come up we've had in a long time. And it's because it is drawing from Sherlock Holmes, which is one of the pillars of this sort of Victorian shadowy intrigue, horror, spooky, mystery, London by gaslight type adventure. So, we like to talk then about some alternative things. We've already mentioned a couple alternative possibilities. But one thing we like to talk about is the aging down, aging up. If you have kids that love The Great Mouse Detective, or they love mysteries, they love Sherlock Holmes, you're like, we're doing this like Disney Ravenlofty game, we're doing a Disney game, I want to do this kind of deerstalker hat and pipe mystery for them. How do you run this for them? And then, of course, how do you do this for adults who have encountered these kind of themes and setting in much less child-friendly context than The Great Mouse Detective?
Is this aging up section going to be more aged up than Snow White? Let's find out.
Yeah, stay tuned. So aging down, the obvious, like, number one is Basil's alive. And we're also, in general, we're not doing a lot of the duality, the corruption, the, like, everyone's a rat. And so I just don't do that. Like, Ratigan's just a bad guy. Yeah. He's a bad were-rat guy. But Basil's alive, and this is a plan, and either the major good NPCs are in on it, like Dawson or Olivia, so they're not too sad, or, like, the PCs get to reveal it. So, like, if Dawson, if Olivia, if they're sad that Basil's dead, the PCs get to, like, reveal it. Like, they get to kind of, even if not publicly reveal Basil's alive, at least reveal to his friends. Yeah. So they get to lift that sadness.
And if you're having them be sad and think that Basil's dead, then for younger players, a way to kind of alleviate that is have somebody from the get-go say that he's still alive. Have Dawson be sad, but Olivia's he's alive, so they can hang their hat on it. Or have them say, no, he's dead after the PCs have already gotten a clue that he's alive.
Right, yeah.
You don't want the kids, like, if this is your kid's favorite movie, you don't want them at any point thinking they killed off Basil. So there has to be some kind of, like, plausible deniability from the moment that somebody says he's dead.
Very movie-style Ratigan, just very, like, evil for the sake of evil, over the top, just loving it when he's nasty. And, no drowning people, no, like, digging into the specifics of his crimes and his infamy, just, like, using this very florid language. Like, the movie's a very good baseline. Just do more adventures with that tone, with that setting. And honestly, if your kids don't know the movie and you just want to use this as sort of an inspiration for, like, a mystery Victoriana setting, you don't even need to have, like, the whole Basil thing.
Yeah.
Like, there can just be, here's Ratigan, the Napoleon of crime. Here's these, like, you know, Dawson and Olivia and these other people, maybe kind of a version of Inspector Lestrade, that are trying to stop him but are outmatched. And then the PCs come and they get to be Basil. Mm-hmm. And once again, it could be like we were talking about, where Dawson can, like, show them all the clues. And they're like, here's the map of his heist. And the PCs are like, let's connect the pins. Oh, it's a circle. And Dawson says, brilliant.
Our occasional co-host, Chris Newton, had the Gameable podcast. And in the Gameable Disney episode for The Great Mouse Detective, he and his wife Katrina were talking about what a great character Watson is. I don't know why I said Watson.
Yeah, right.
Dawson. They're
it's
completely
crazy.
different.
It's so mixed up.
But what a great NPC Dawson is to have if you're playing with kids. Because he can, like, sit there and go, I don't understand. There's this map with all these pins, and I feel like the colors mean something, but I just can't put my finger on what. And then the PCs, who are the kids, can come in and be like, aha, this is what it means. So, like, having Dawson be there, like, hold the hand and lead them right up to the solution, but stop, is just, you couldn't ask for better for gaming with kids.
Why, look, what's in the center of the circle? It's an abandoned warehouse.
What could it mean?
So, yeah, this is a really cool potential kid setting, especially if you have kids that love mysteries, and this is a really good way to work in some mystery into sort of your D&D game. Mm-hmm. Some slightly spooky mystery, and also, you know, if they love mysteries, they've probably at least heard of Sherlock Holmes or vaguely aware of Sherlock Holmes. And this is a great way to give them a kind of Sherlock Holmes adventure, but in an already kid-friendly package.
Yeah. Oh, and if you are doing that there's no Basil and you're not worrying about Basil at all, then his torment is just the fact that you don't have to worry about Basil being part of his torment because he has the whole were-rat thing. And that's his torment in the movie. So you don't have to worry about, like, but if he's not worrying about Basil being dead, what's his torment? No, he has one. He has his movie torment.
But what if you want a kid-unfriendly package? a kid-hostile package?
Yeah, that's our Jekyll. What about our Hyde?
Rachel, what's our Hyde here?
Okay, this is not one of those where we can just say...
Probably fine.
No. Yeah, there's... Future Rachel is going to come in with a more detailed content warning and how far to skip the heck ahead if you have kids in the room. Now, this is Future Rachel. I don't think that we get as bad as we did in Snow White, but there is discussion of the possibilities of vice peddling in Ratigan's Empire, including the use of words that rhyme with textual and with thorny. There's also an oblique reference to torture, and we do get into... With Jack the Ripper stuff, there's some discussion of that, discussion of gendered violence. We don't get into any kind of detail with gendered violence or anything like that, but it is mentioned. If you don't want to get into any of that, you're going to want to skip ahead about 6 minutes to around 128. So, yeah, boy howdy, let's see if this is going to be worse than Snow White. Yeah. So, first off, we've got the rat trap.
Yeah.
And the let me be good to you scene. Yeah. And that implies a vice element in Ratigan's Empire that you can be playing with a lot. Once again, tying into a lot of that, you know, Victorian Jekyll and Hyde, tying into, once again, the ridiculous, glorious mac and cheese of the Jekyll and Hyde musical, where so much of it is hypocrisy equals sexual repression. Yeah. There's nothing else to hypocrisy. Also, the fact that her name is Miss Kitty that's just kinky. Also, spoilers for incorporating the older material. There was, in the older material, you had Nova Vasa, which was the Jekyll and Hyde domain. And there was a lot of stuff in Nova Vasa that was really thematically incoherent with Malkin that actually works beautifully with Ratigan.
Yes.
Because they had this whole thing with Malkin where he was this, like, very edgelord 90s serial killer who did horrible things to women and blah, blah, blah. So much gendered violence. So edgy.
Edgy. It's the 90s. We all watched Seven.
But he was also this big crime lord. And those are two very different psychologies. They don't so much go together. But if you wanted to have Ratigan be a Malkin-esque figure, you could actually do that. Kind of going back to what Tom was saying with having Jekyll and Hyde be a lycanthrope. You could have this suave Napoleon of crime Ratigan.
Right, that's our Jekyll.
Who's our Jekyll-ish. He's not good, but he's at least, like... Rational. And then he rats out and turns into this feral monster. So if you wanted to do a thing where Jack the Ripper is Ratigan, you could make it work without having to worry about the fact that, a serial killer and a crime boss have very different psychologies. But getting into that means getting down and dirty with the feral killer.
Yeah.
So, if you want to get us down and dirty with the feral killer part, as they sometimes did with Malkin, be my guest, but... Yeah.
Just be aware, it's our job to say this is a thing. This is a possibility you have, and this is a thing that you'd want to contact check with people.
Yes. In the aging up, there's a non-zero chance that Dawson is dead.
Yeah.
Because Ratigan totally would have killed him with a flush Basil out. He totally would have been like, I'm gonna kill him, Basil!
You have 24 hours to follow my clues. Oh, he's dead.
Yeah. Or maybe Ratigan just killed him in a fit of pique. Ratted out and killed him in a fit of pique when he found out that...
You could have a whole scene where, he confronted Dawson and was demanding to know the real plan, and Dawson kept going, no, he's dead. And that, made him rat out and murder him because he was so upset that Dawson was saying that Basil was dead.
Yeah. Honestly, the nastiest thing you could possibly do with Dawson would be that he hasn't killed him yet because he knows that if he does, he'll lose his bargaining chip. But in that case, he still has to be doing terrible things to Dawson to try to flush Basil out. So, sorry, Dawson. I don't like this version.
To quote Ratigan, sorry, Chubby. Should have picked your friends more carefully.
Even if you don't want to get into, vice and stuff like that, you can get much nastier with the violence.
Yeah.
Not even getting into, what we were just talking about with Malkin, getting into, 90s edgelords.
This doesn't need to be
violence.
7.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be 7. It just needs to be Ratigan murders people.
Yeah.
It can be Kohler generational bingo. It can be Tony Dracon levels of violence, and that's still more violent than what we're getting in Ravenloft Detective. If you are not into Kohler generational bingo, that's the gangster from Gargoyles, and he is in an episode where a character almost dies. So, and then, speaking of vice, in addition to all the "Let me be good to you, Miss Kitty" stuff. The rat trap, they drug the drinks. They're the very strong drinks. There can be opium. That's
another one of those, iconic sort of Victorian crime underworld things is the opium den.
Yeah.
Or, the opium addicts, that's another, sort of iconic milieu of this setting of Victorian underworld Sherlock Holmes, Jack the Ripper.
And that's, once again, for getting into the whole, duality, hypocrisy, Ratigan has something on everyone. If they're addicted to something that only he's selling, that's a real easy way for him to have people in his pocket. And just generally... Victorian hypocrisy stuff.
It's a very well tried.
Watch
any episode of Doctor Who set in the Victorian era for the last decade.
Watch Penny Dreadful.
Watch Penny Dreadful. We don't.
Once again, watch Jekyll and Hyde. It's so horny.
Yeah. This is a very well plowed field.
Yeah.
That if you're kind of have a finger in horror. Spooky stuff. I feel like you've already thought of a couple things.
Session Zero, all this stuff.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
But you know this, but we have to say it. Session Zero it.
But just as we have a darklord that's going to be very engaged with the players, going to be a strong antagonist who has a very strong theme of duality and hypocrisy and the kind of beast within. And there is million billion themes and NPCs and plots and character beats you could spin out anchored to that core idea.
Yes.
So, hopefully we have pitched you on our contention that this is one of the richest and most fertile and most varied, thematically coherent settings that we have done in a long time. We will wrap up our discussion of Londinium and give you our parting thoughts in a section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing we like to do in Parting Thoughts is we like to talk about the genres of horror. In Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, we both agree one of the best sections is this description of different genres of horror, and then the guide to sort of using that to define the horror, to guide your horror GMing. So we also like to do the genres of horror. I feel like there's one very strong contender.
Yeah.
I keep saying spooky supernatural mystery, which is kind of a synonym for
occult investigation.
Occult investigation, ladies and gentlemen.
This is actually the reason why we chose to do this episode.
Yes.
Because when we did Robin Hood, and we got Slasher, and we checked Slasher off, the only thing left on our list was occult investigation. And we knew we were going to do Toy Story in September. We knew we had to do something spooky in October. But we said, after that, we're going to do Great Mouse Detective.
Right.
Because that's got to check off occult investigation. We didn't realize we were going to have checked it off last month with Coco.
Yes. October was like, something spooky.
Yes.
November, Great Mouse Detective.
That's the choice of doing it live. We checked off occult investigation early, but...
And now we've caught them all.
Yes. Obviously, this is the occult investigation-iest of them.
Yeah, so there are a couple other possibilities. What do you think is sort of our strongest second? What do you think is a good second for the write-up?
That is really tricky because this is such a varied setting. This is such a Rorschach block with so many options that I feel like you could do just about anything for your second shit. If you really wanted to do Jack the Ripper, you could do Slasher.
Yeah.
If you wanted to be, bring in some of these more like Dracula-like themes, or some ways to play up the internal darkness themes, you could do Gothic.
Very, very, very easily.
I think with all the duality stuff and with the, not knowing who's in Ratigan's pocket at any given time, that the way to be playing up those duality themes is through psychological.
Yes,
I'll do that for my second. But
I'm actually comfortable just using occult investigation.
Okay.
Especially because this is such a, occult investigation.
Yeah.
This is you do not get more occult investigation than a Sherlock Holmes
Leaping Holmes
domain. That this is such a strong defining genre. And then everything else is sort of taking that occult investigation, steering it in the direction. So if you're okay with the write-up just being occult investigation. But here you go, dear listener, lots of other possibilities.
I'm curious, I can see, the spin for Slasher, Psychological, and Gothic. Were there any others that you kind of had in the back of your head?
I was mainly thinking Gothic. My second choice probably would have been Gothic, especially if Ratigan is getting entangled with the PCs and is manipulating them, and you kind of have Ratigan as the Gothic villain, the kind of corrupter Gothic villain. Oh, yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
And even the sort of, it's all about the past. It's all about his sort of, this thing that happened with Basil is still casting its shadow. Basil's death is still kind of casting its shadow over the present, and, kind of Ratigan never really left Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah.
And is still sort of part of him still waiting there to fight Basil. And so I would probably have done Gothic.
Cool.
But like I said, that's occult investigation is so much this domain, and this domain is so much occult investigation that I will have that as the solo for the write-up.
And then, dear listeners, if you decide to use Londinium, then you can choose what your second genre is, because there are so many options.
Right, you seriously tell us on our socials, and especially Patreon, which you should join, to what your second genre was. What type of game did you run in Londinium?
If you join our Patreon, you get on our Discord, which is a great place.
It's a good place to be, yeah. And then we like to talk about what kind of game is suitable for the setting, and we said it a couple times.
Multiple times.
If you weren't suspense. Some places like Barovia or Darkon or Londinium are these massive settings with huge, dozens of NPCs, dozens of plot hooks. You could have a years-long game there. Others, like last month's Santa Cecilia, are really like one adventure.
Or even more so the previous month's Toy Story.
Yes. But they're short, they're like 1 session, 3 sessions. There's kind of one core adventure. And Santa Cecilia had some variants, but it was not like a Curse of Strahd level, you are in Barovia for 3 years of gameplay. And this is you are in Londinium for 3 years of gameplay.
Yes.
This is just a full campaign. You could all make PCs that are native to Londinium. You could go to no other domains, just Londinium, and you could have years of gameplay just in Victorian London. And there are entire RPG lines that are Victorian mysteries. I think it's Cubicle 7 is coming out with a 5e version of their game. There's kind of steampunk Victoriana.
Oh, nice.
So that's even going to give you a bunch of possible stuff you could port over in 5e. You know, White Wolf did Vampire by Gaslight and Mage by Gaslight, and there's Cthulhu by Gaslight. And
got Mask of the Red Death. If you're running, the older stuff.
A lot of that's available on... DM's Guild has some Mask of the Red Death stuff.
I need to warn you, if it has the 3 ebook, the Mystic rules are unusable. So they're literally. I tried. Yeah,
she tried so hard.
They had 2 different versions of it, and they didn't decide on them before it went to print. It's bad.
There's libraries of people doing Sherlock Holmes with a supernatural twist. Like, just not even Sherlock Holmes with a supernatural twist. You could have just, there's so much to do here. And then we've even gone through and said it's not just the city. Like, that, the city's enough.
Yeah.
But we've said it's like a city-state, so you can have... You track Ratigan's gang of smugglers to a quiet seaside village with a dark secret. You track... Ratigan is tangled up with some goings-ons in the moors involving a mansion and a mysterious ghost hound that's menacing the new lord of this estate. You have so many possibilities.
Yeah.
But we see the core adventure, and this is less the case in a place like Santa Cecilia. I think the core adventure is going to be you're entangled in Ratigan's psychodrama. You have multiple adventures dealing with him. And that he might be deliberately leveling you up.
Yeah, like we were talking about previously, he's like chosen you to be his new opponent. Maybe he's trying to use you to get Basil. Maybe he sees you as a distraction.
Right, yeah.
This is all about Basil. Who cares about these guys? But whatever the case may be. Maybe you're his rebound boyfriend.
And then you've got the natural plot arc of you're building up this, like, a plan to blow up the ocean. Or, like, set London on fire... or open up a gate to the netherworld, or replace the queen with a robot, or, like, some just absurdly over-the-top supervillainy, build an electro ray and hold the city hostage, like, that he is, like, this is gonna flush Basil out. Like, this is going to finally be the thing that's so bad, it's going to force Basil to come out of hiding and confront me.
Attack the city with a cattle stampede?
Yeah, exactly. Cattle stampede, if he gets the right land deed. But Basil's not there, and you have to stop it. And I would, of course, if I were running this, be dropping hints that Basil is alive, and that Basil's helping you. Like, you would... And this is the great thing. The Basil is alive is the perfect excuse for you, the GM, to give them hints if they're stuck. Or to give them, like, some guidance if they're stuck.
Or maybe he's not alive.
Yes.
Maybe he's a ghost.
It's perfect. You could square the circle. If your PCs get really invested in is Basil alive or dead, and you're like, I don't have it's either going to be yes or no. You have a great third option. A yes but, which is, no, Basil died, but his ghost is opposing Ratigan.
Yeah.
And that could be oh wow, we were both right.
And then by defeating Ratigan, maybe, if you're doing a thing where Ratigan has, like, Dawson or Olivia or somebody hostage, and you rescue them, then you help put Basil to rest.
Right.
Yeah.
But just, you could have even the yes, but you could have the third option of the two, of the binary. But Basil, you have this great plot device for the PCs are stuck. And, they're stuck, and they get a mysterious envelope with a clue in it. Or, like, they're stuck, they're locked in the dungeon, and, like, mysteriously the door opens. And you could just have this, like, helper shadowing their steps and helping them out. And it's not going to be, like, obnoxious or intrusive if the sort of, you hint at the end that it was Basil. Like, it absolutely would do the constabulary is leading Ratigan away in chains, and they, like... kind of hear a noise, and they look up, and in the alley there's a shadow of a man in a deerstalker hat and with a pipe, and he kind of tips his deerstalker to them and steps into the shadows and vanishes, and they're like, oh wow. Yeah, that's all high five. So that's what we see, sort of the core story here, the kind of equivalent of protecting a Tatiana reincarnation from Strahd. I would consider a part of that to be the sort of hinting that Basil's alive and helping behind the scenes. But not necessarily. Yeah. Like, that's just how I would run it.
And once again, with this being such a broad thing, the great thing is that the finding a Tatiana reincarnation and helping equivalent is so broad. Like, Ratigan is up to something.
Yeah, he has a plan.
He has a plan. It is a bad plan. This could be a plan that spans multiple sessions over the course of several years. Or he can have several plans of escalating complexity.
You could totally have the, like, he has all these jobs and you thwart the job, but he got, like, the crystal and you thwarted the thing, but it wasn't really about the mummy's tomb. It was really about the, like, alloys that he's building his lightning gun.
Yeah.
He's going to use to put on Big Ben and hold the city hostage. And just have that great sort of, like, season of a cartoon, like plot structure of, like, there's the individual cases, but he always had this wider plan in the background, and you're thwarting the individual crimes, but he is building up, you're finding these clues that he's got this wider agenda these crimes are about. But now, we've mentioned a couple older pieces of material that this connects to, and I feel like that's gotta be it, right, Rachel? There's not, like, more older we could say about the connection to the older material, or am I mistaken?
Oh, where to even begin? Holy monkey pants. There are at least 3 domains that this connects to, like, really tightly, and that's not even getting into where we're having to stretch. So, the first one, like the clearest one, the one that we keep mentioning, well, one of the 2 that we keep mentioning over and over again, and by we, I mean I.
The royal we. Like Queen Moustoria.
Yes. Is Nova Vasa. And, once again, Nova Vasa, in the older material, it was kind of like Uruk von Karkov. It was trying to do too much. It was like Jekyll and Hyde, but also Hyde is a criminal mastermind, like gang leader, but also horses.
Yeah, and also the Great Plains, the Russian steppes. The vast glory of America's Great Plains.
So, like, if you skip to the aging up section just really briefly, it was, you had the Hyde character was a criminal mastermind and a serial killer simultaneously, and it made no sense because they have completely different psychologies. But here, if you wanted to do that, you could actually make it work because he does have 2 completely different psychologies. They're just both bad, and one of them is, like, rational and one of them isn't. So you can do those duality themes. You can have that, like, crime boss type character, kind of like Malkin. If you want to just, honestly, I can't stand Nova Vasa, and apologies
to our Nova Vasa fans out there.
If there are any Nova Vasa fans out there, please let me know. Let me know what you like about it. I have never met anyone who liked Nova Vasa. And just let me know what you like about it. Let me see it through your eyes. It is better to like things than not like them. But I've never met anyone who liked Nova Vasa. I would just put Londinium where Nova Vasa is and have Ratigan be Malkin. And then there was all this stuff in the older material about how Malkin was the big crime lord. He had all these, spidery tendrils going through the other domains, like trying to expand his operation and this and that. And you can have Ratigan in that place instead. So once again, one of the plot hooks that we had was you catch one of Ratigan's operatives who's like kind of like trying to bring some kind of smuggling operation into Darkon or whatever, and that takes you into Londinium. And you could do that here. If you did want to do that, then I would replace Nova Vasa with Londinium entirely, because if you have both Malkin and Ratigan, then Ratigan's going to have a new rival. It's not going to be Basil, it's not going to be someone who's trying to, like, foil him and get him arrested, but he's going to have someone else that he's matching wits with. It's just going to be that which of them is going to be the greatest criminal mind of the Corps. Corps' greatest criminal mind. Unless your plot hook is that he, is still kind of small potatoes at this point and is trying to get Malkin's attention, which could be fun. Malkin is his rebound boyfriend.
Honestly, like, a gang war, a, like, cross-core gang war could be a real cool, like,
that could be cool,
meta-plot thing to be happening. That, like, Malkin's got his empire, and there's this upstart from Londinium is muscling in.
Yeah.
And, of course, all the innocents are caught in the crossfire. So that, like, kind of gives your PCs a ton of reasons to get invested. And that could be a really cool, like, thread to follow to get them to Londinium.
Now that we're saying this, that is really cool. And as long as Ratigan never realized that Malkin could be a replacement for Basil, that's what matters. But what matters is that Ratigan sees Malkin and says, okay, now I have a new rival. If he never sees Malkin as being his new Basil, then he's not going to be looking at what he has. Right. He's going to be too busy looking back at what he had. How can you go look at your new boyfriend?
And just, like, you could totally see the whole, like, well, I'll throw myself into work to keep myself busy. This is why suddenly Ratigan's going crazy, expanding his empire. He's trying to, like, keep himself busy. He's like, this is a project to keep myself busy so I don't have to mourn Basil.
Okay, I take back everything I said. Have both Ratigan and Malkin. This is fabulous.
And there's so many ways to get PCs then into that story. And even you have this wonderful, you could do your classic, like, look, Malkin's bad, but he was one empire. He was one mob. This is a gang war. This is worse. Like, this is so many more people are dying every week in the fights between these two guys. We need to stop this. Yeah. Like, we need to restore the status quo, but the status quo is better than this.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. The other one we keep mentioning over and over again is Paradon/Xerisia, which, again, it was like, there was a cluster that was Xerisia, and the London city on top was a domain called Paradon, and it had the sewers underneath, which were a domain called Timor. So I think it's just Xerisia in 5e.
And they mention there's a city of Paradon.
Yeah. So that's why I keep using them interchangeably. That was the Jack the Ripper domain in the older material. And it was really good. It had a frustratingly tiny write-up in 5e. It was the old London by Gaslight setting, so if you have any older stuff, you can really easily port it over and put it into Londinium. And the great thing is, Hour of the Knife, the Jack the Ripper Paradon mod, is available on DM's Guild, so you can get that. And there was a fan mod called Shadow of the Knife that was a sequel to that that's really good. I've run it. It's spectacular, and you can get that for free because it's a fan mod. And
this was like Ravenloft Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And they made that Paradon, if I remember correctly, they made that, like, setting, that, like, big Victorian steamy gaslight setting just to do this. Yes. It was a setting built to support an adventure, and nothing about Paradon is so unique that you couldn't just almost port the adventure wholesale into Londinium.
Yeah.
Like, you could do a lot of just taking that as an adventure and running it in Londinium instead, if you wanted to do this Jack the Ripper inspired story.
Yeah, because spoilers for Hour of the Knife, but the original Darklord of Paradon was a doppelganger, and so the whole idea with Jack the Ripper was that there wasn't one Jack the Ripper, it was a group of doppelgangers, and it was this magical knife that was harvesting life energy. So Jack the Ripper could be anyone, because he was a shape changer. And you could really easily just have that be a cult that's in Londinium with Ratigan as a Darklord. Or if you conversely, if you're a Grognard who really loves Sodo, the original Darklord of Paradon, for whatever reason, then you can have Ratigan be an NPC in Paradon. That works too. And then the other obvious domain link that I cannot believe we haven't mentioned so far, because it's so obvious that we would have mentioned it by this point if Novavasa and Paradon hadn't been so perfect, is Rishmallow.
Right.
Because Were-Rat.
It's the Were-Rat domain.
It's our other Were-Rat Darklord.
We've got crime. We've got Victorian London. We've got Were-Rats.
The older stuff, instead of it being like the plague theme, it was much more of a kind of like a duplicity rats in the walls kind of thing, which again is a thing that you could do really, really easily here. The idea that everyone is eavesdropping, everyone's listening in on you.
Working for Ratigan.
If you wanted to have Ratigan not be the only were-rat, then you could have there be rats that are listening to the walls. I wouldn't want there to be too many were-rats because we need that sense of isolation. But if you wanted to have it be that there are literally rats in the walls listening, you can do that. And then Ratigan, he despises them, he feels superior to them because he is the superior mind, but he's still willing to use them. You could have there be sewers full of rat monsters, which was a thing that old Rishmallow had, kind of again bringing in the creepiness of London sewers and everything.
Great dungeon.
Once again, you're tying into that duality theme because up above you have this beautiful city, but underneath it's hideous and full of rats. Also, I don't know what kind of relationship he and Jekyll and Hyde have, but I know it's interesting. Because either they're, like, writing each other love letters all the time, or they hate each other because of his self-loathing, and he looks at Jekyll and Rainier, and all he sees is, why can't you see what horrible monsters we are? But either way, it's going to be really interesting. There was a thing in 3rd edition. This was kind of the genesis of the Gnaws, the Gnawing Plague, was Jekyll and Rainier, instead of trying to do a plague like that, she wanted to do a plague that would turn everyone in Rishmallow into a were-rat under her control. That was like the big thing she was trying to engineer. I could see Ratigan doing something like that, because if everyone's a were-rat, then no one's better than him. So that's another fun final scheme for Ratigan, since Jekyll and Rainier's not using it anymore.
And this is the thing with Ratigan that we keep saying, and it keeps being true, that he could just be an NPC. And the great thing is, almost any of these domains, well, except Nova Vasa, like a criminal mastermind, Napoleon of crime boss NPC, adds a really luxury spice to the mix. Like, to Rishmallow. You could have Rishmallow as it is in the 5e write-up, and then just add in, and there is this criminal mastermind who runs the underworld named Professor Ratigan. He's like sometimes an ally, sometimes an enemy of Jekyll and Rainier, and that just adds a lot of spice to the mix and gives your players some really interesting potential sort of political interactions to get involved with.
Yeah.
Good lord, the section is still happening. Okay, almost done.
We're almost done.
Okay, almost done.
Because there's one other thing we have to talk about.
We have to talk about.
We have to talk about Alan McRae.
Crime, plus Victorian London, plus were-rats, plus Sherlock Holmes. Equals the domain we have just made, and are those 4 things are already in Ravenloft.
I hope you're not sick of my voice yet, dear listeners, because boy howdy, this section's real long.
Going on.
So, Alan McRae, you could have him be the Basil. If you have him be the Basil, you could actually kind of play through this whole Reichenbach Falls thing. He's an NPC in the beginning of your game. He mentions Ratigan a few times, and then he dies. Because there isn't a canonical Moriarty.
Yes, it's a great space to fill. If we have a canonical Ravenloft Sherlock Holmes equivalent and a Watson equivalent, but we do not have a Moriarty equivalent.
Yeah.
And the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft Adventurers League campaign. That's a lot of words. The premise is Alan McRae's the quest giver. Like, you all get hired by him, and you get sent on missions, and that's kind of how they have it be this sort of domain-hopping Kingdom Hearts style. Like, you get your, like, adventure in each domain, and if you were running that campaign or adapting that campaign, you have this pre-existing relationship to Alan McRae. So it'd be really easy to run that. I have him occasionally drop a few lines about Professor Ratigan, the Napoleon of crime. Or the whatever the Ravenloft equivalent of Napoleon is of crime. The world's greatest criminal mind.
It's not the Dracon, I'll tell you that.
The Strahd von Zarovich of crime. And then do a Reichenbach Falls and have, like, the gut punch of finding out that Ratigan's killed Alanek. And then you can, we gotta go to Londinium and, like, take it up. So you could really easily have this as a kind of sequel to that Van Richten's, I think it's called Mist Hunters Adventures League campaign.
And if you do decide to go this route, we're talking about aging up, possibly bad things happening to Dawson. Tread carefully if you're going to have something bad happen to Arthur Sedgwick, because they are the only, wholesome, healthy gay couple in canon Ravenloft.
That we are aware of. We haven't read the Adventures League campaign. Maybe there's like some nice lesbians in it. We don't know.
I don't know, but we've got like has like in his dead portal boyfriend. And this is the one good gay couple. So
careful. So, unless I think that's everything,
yes.
We like to wrap up our discussion of this domain with talking about some of the strengths and challenges. And I just have a lot of random things written as strengths. It's amazing! It's great. It's the best. This is an iconic horror setting. This is just a major, major setting of horror literature, of Gothic literature. This is a chance to draw in some of the major pieces of the Gothic canon. Like Jekyll and Hyde, they're not really there in current Ravenloft. They're not super well executed at older Ravenloft. And it is, especially with 5e, it's a really unfulfilled niche because they didn't have a major section, a major write-up on Paradon. So there is
Nova Vasa so much.
Massive space in 5e Ravenloft for a Victorian London by Gaslight, Jack the Ripper, Sherlock Holmes setting. And Vincent Price! Like, I cannot think of a higher
Yes.
recommendation of that, and the ending of the strengths just says Vincent Price, exclamation point. But there are some challenges. We touched on these, and we said we'd circle back to them. I think this is the last stuff we said we'd circle back to. So here we are at the end, circling back.
It's bigger rest of an episode.
Yeah, right.
If you are doing the older stuff, then there is overlap. Like, if you're not doing any of the older stuff, this isn't a problem at all. But if you are doing the older stuff, there's a chance that you're listening and going, this is great, we just finished a giant arc in Paradon. And, in that case, there's a bunch of overlap there. And then the other thing that we keep talking about this, and that we kept saying, if you keep thinking that Ratigan sounds super annoying as a villain, put a pin in that, because we're going to get to it in challenges.
Taking the pins out, guys.
Ratigan has the potential to be super annoying as a villain.
Yes.
It's really frustrating as a PC to have the villain who always knows what you're doing, the villain who you find out you were secretly working for the whole time. Like, there's
manipulating every step of the way.
If you don't play this right, then there's a chance that your PCs are going to feel punked.
In our friend and occasional co-host Chris's podcast, Mega Dumbcast, which you should not listen to around your children, but you should listen to not around your children.
Just not around your children.
There was a season about a supplement for I think it was Street Fighter RPG. Mm-hmm. And it was, what was the exact thing? M.
Bison is manipulating the PCs.
Uh-huh.
And they are puppets on Bison's string.
Right. And Chris had a whole thing about your PCs don't want to be...
Yeah, so someone on Twitter misheard this as butt puppets.
Yes.
And thus this phrase was born.
Your PCs never want to be butt puppets. And that's just especially Dungeons & Dragons PCs, the proactivity and the freedom and the autonomy is a huge part of the power fantasy.
Yes.
So even more than in like real life, it would be disappointing to find out you had this mastermind manipulating you, but part of you would be like, okay. But the fantasy of Dungeons and Dragons is you are not the kind of person who is a butt puppet.
Yes.
So be careful.
And it also it violates the social contract with the GM that it says, Ratigan's been manipulating you. It's I've been manipulating you.
Yeah.
Don't listen to it around your kids. We're going to link to the episode about the butt puppets in the show notes because Chris has some interesting thoughts there about how you could actually do that storyline well. The short version of this basically is make sure, if he is manipulating the PCs all along, that the things he's getting them to do are things they would have done anyway. That they still have agency, that they're still making choices.
Yeah.
They are in fact investigating to see whether or not Basil's alive.
Right.
Like, when they're fouling up Ratigan's plans, they're legitimately fouling up his plans. And, he's kind of happy that they're fouling up his plans, but he's also kind of annoyed. There's a really good way around this, too, if you don't want it to constantly be Ratigan in charge, is his temper.
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key.
If you're feeling like a butt puppet, then you can get around Ratigan and you can get his temper to show, and then his entire plan falls apart.
Yeah, you get under his skin, you call him a rat, you wear rats out, and it messes up his entire... no, we got him.
You ruined his day.
And even just, our experience was with him showed us... He is so sensitive about this. We know exactly what button to push to make him fly off the handle and ruin his plan.
Yeah.
And that's a victory. That's a win. That's a good feeling.
Yeah. Once again, continuing our generational
wow,
bingo.
That's a real bingo card episode.
It is a bingo card episode, but all I have written here is Gargoyles versus Young Justice. two Greg Weisman shows,
yes.
Both of which had a whole thing with a mastermind who was always ahead of things. If you've run into the Xanatos Gambit on TV tropes, and that's where this comes from. And in Gargoyles, you had Xanatos, who was always the villain who was in charge of everything. In Young Justice, I almost rage quit season 1 because you had this conspiracy called The Light that was in charge of everything, and they were so annoying. Yeah. I hated them so much. And the difference was that you would get, at the end of episodes of Gargoyles, you would get Xanatos saying, well, that didn't go the way I planned it to, but I can still turn it to my advantage.
Or well, I got this thing.
I got this thing out of it. Whereas at the end of Young Justice, you'd have the Young Justice would say that they'd won, and then you'd get, Lex Luthor and Ra's al Ghul sitting around going, they think they won, but they played right into our hands. To heck with you!
Yeah.
Go fly a kite!
Why am I watching? Why am I watching these guys be butt puppets?
Yeah. So, have it be that Ratigan is plucking victory from the jaws of defeat.
They are legitimately the war. Like, if you watch Gargoyles, and you should, it's on Disney Plus, it's great.
It's great.
Maybe coming soon. I
hope so.
We got some ideas.
Simone is a Darklord.
Yeah. It's gonna happen.
The access code is alone.
Okay, it's gonna happen. All right. Just get off our back. The Gargoyles legitimately thwart Xanatos' plans.
Yes.
It's not just, all of this was a mastermind. It's no, Xanatos had a plan, the Gargoyles overcome it, but Xanatos is able to make that work, is able to get, as you said, a victory from the jaws of defeat, or is able to say, well, but there's this upside that I can take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Before we rejoin our narrator and find out the very different domain she is going to next, kind of the opposite of this.
We, dear listeners, this is going to be a little bit of a departure for us, in that it is not a Disney animated movie, which we normally do, but in the spirit of December, it's going to be...
The spirit of the holiday season.
Yeah, spirit of the holiday season.
Where can they reach out to us and tell us what is great about Nova Vasa, or what other genres of horror they ran in Londinium?
Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook or Tumblr at Wonderful World of Darklords. And you can find us on our Patreon at Wonderful World of Darklords 651. I have no idea why the 651 is there, but it is.
There you go. And if you were saying to yourself, wow, they did a really good job adapting this fun Disney cartoon Sherlock Holmes movie into a horror setting, then I have a couple of things on DM's Guild. There's, of course, going to be the write-up to this domain. It's going to have our chart of Ratigan plans, including stealing the crown jewels. But I also have a couple of horror movies that I've adapted into adventures. Some of them, like Ravenloft, Curse of Strahd specific, but also setting neutral versions. If you want to do that, just search for more by this author from the show notes link, or just search for Tom Kohler. And if you like how we are sensitive to the emotional, concerns of younger viewers with Basil being dead, we have a couple of really good resources for running spookier, more kind of horror, Halloween adjacent stuff with younger players that you should really check out.
And speaking of spooky things for younger people, I have a picture book, Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. It's exactly what it sounds like. For spooky things for older people, you can go to my website, www.rachelkohler.com, where I have various short stories that are kind of in the dark fantasy, horror, comedy, kind of our thing.
You kind of get our deal.
You get our deal.
Until next time, until that surprising December domain
20th
rolls
Century
around.
Fox is now owned by Disney, which makes this a Disney movie.
Yes, it does. Thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. I conducted further research into Basil's death, all of which I have attached. But while his body was never found, there is no evidence that he is still present in Londinium, alive or undead. It could be that Ratigan is so mired in paranoia that he cannot believe his hated foe is dead, but the expression I saw on his face was not one of hatred. Perhaps the two were friends or lovers before they found themselves on opposite sides of the law? The sight of those captured, frightened children gnawed at me. Between losing the memories of my family in Sunnyside, my strange encounter with the Alabrije in Santa Cecilia, and now these children, I found myself desperately missing my family. I needed a resupply anyway. Perhaps I could do so in Salem. I held my mist talisman, a small pumpkin, and entered the mists with home in mind, but my thoughts were scattered. My niece's face was replaced with that of one of the handmaids from the Queenswood, my brother's with the frozen gaze of Princess Anna. When the mists parted, I was not standing in Salem. I was in a wealthy house, one that had been ransacked by bandits. Furniture was overturned, and a Yule tree was stripped of all its decorations and gifts. The bandits had broken the windows, leaving the house at the mercy of the elements, and I stood ankle-deep in rainwater. I had not arrived home. With my distraction, I made my family disappear. Regards, D.
Should my little servant continue to act indignant and foolish every time she receives constructive criticism, she may condemn herself to wander aimlessly through these misty realms forever, never to return to the family she longs to see. Anger distracts the mind, and traversing the mist requires diligent focus, lest one be led astray. My scholar's scrupulous report provided a wealth of information that entertained me for quite some time, despite the unnecessary, exhaustive descriptions. Though you are not privy to my interest in these realms, I expect you to exert logic when approaching your research into the domains and their dread lords. Something, much like Ratigan, my servant often lacks when overcome with emotion. Whereas Ratigan is misguided by his wrath, my servant often succumbs to nostalgia. Do not mistake my observations of your character for insult. It discredits us both. Utilize all of the tools at your disposal and let reason guide you. As for Ratigan, he has built a criminal empire and controls every aspect of Londinium from his throne of refuse. Most crime lords would be satisfied with such an achievement. Ratigan, the self-proclaimed greatest criminal mind, craves more than power. He desires undeniable proof that his mind triumphs over all others. However, with no worthy adversary to challenge him, the game, as the professor has been known to call it, grows stale.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Darklord Aslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. Future Rachel is going to come in with a more detailed content warning and how far to skip the heck ahead if you have kids in the room. Now.
Beep. Hey folks, Future Ripper here. Jack the Ripper cut out the turn him in the fire.